Good day. Let's unravel some of the mysteries behind Guitar Amplifier. This is an upgrade to the last configuration I showed you. What I've added here is a mid control along with your bass and treble. And this test instrument right here is called a bode plotter, which determines tones. Right now the settings is for the audio frequency range, which is 20,000 cycles. So listen, let's check out what happens when we make some adjustment. Right now this is the bass control, the mid control, the treble control, and everything is set to 50%, which is basically flat. So let's see what happens when we adjust these. We have a rise in high frequency, and it's telling us right here that I have a boost at 7 point something K, 7.8 K. And the limitation of a guitar amplifier, whatever value these capacitors is set to, that's the only frequency you can boost. And is why I go through the console, because when I'm going through the console I have different selection of frequency that I can choose, whether it be a 5K, a 10K, or 1K. And is why a guitar amplifier again has no special tone to it. Let's see what happens when I do the opposite thing, which is the mid frequency. Right now it's at 50%. What we should see here is this section where the mid goes up, and this where we had a rise, it's supposed to go back flat. Let's run the analysis and see what happens. So we have a rise in the mid frequency. So because the function generator is set to a 1K, then you see you have a 18 dB boost in the mid. If I should move back this to the 50%, then you will not see this boost. You see it gone back down to 2 dBs. So let's run the analysis again, and it should get back pretty much a straight line. A straight line. So if I do the opposite now with the bass, you should have an increase in low frequency, and this section should rise. Yeah, the blood plotter is showing you that there's a rise in low frequency. And again, this instrument is what we use to determine the frequency response and any kind of tone that a guitar amplifier should have. All audio amplifiers, for it to be able to be passed and certified, you have to be able to pass from 20 to 20,000 cycles. And if I was building an amplifier and I see a very dramatic dip in any of these frequencies, then the amplifier would be considered defective. So what else different that I've done? So the more powerful version to the amplifier, like what I and King Tubby's built back in the 70s and 80s, is a circuit like this. This is a double 12AX7 triode, and it has a plate, a grid, a cathode, the heater section, the filament. That's when you see that light inside the tube, this is the heater section, and this is a double triode. And let's look at the data sheet. The data sheet is saying, let's see, the data sheet is saying it has it can take 330 volts plate supply voltage. And what we do in electronics is to run the components at half the breakdown voltage. When you run it at half the breakdown voltage, you will preserve the component, make them have a longer life, and also you're not pushing the component near to its limit. Followed by this, we have what you call the phase inverter current booster, the first one and the second one. And what this does, because we are having so many output tubes, like I would show you, it needs more drive current. And these two components right here are what they consider are what they call DC, a blocking capacitor, along with this connector that I have here, that if I needed was to add a different or more output stage, instead of building a next phase inverter, I could just run a connector with a ribbon cable and have a different circuit board with only the output tubes. And with KT88, it's considered a pentode, because why? It have a plate, a screen grid, again a control grid, a cathode, and a heater, the filament. So instead of two KT88 like the previous version I show you, this one is 8 KT88, and the output power based on this transformer, it can deliver 1.375 kilowatts at 1375 watts. And this is the power of it here. So okay, so let's do some check here. Let me check this voltage. (186 volts), 186 volts, which is below again the breakdown voltage. And if I should go directly on the plate of this output tube, I'm at 106, 107 something, but like that average. So I'm way below the breakdown voltage, giving the vacuum tube more headroom, more headroom. Let's move on to the printed circuit section. And with the printed circuit board section, it's a critical layout. The printed board section is a critical layout. It has to be laid out a specific way because of technical reasons, so you don't incur what they call harking because it's high voltage. So here we have the first 12AX7 preamp phase inverter, and followed through by the phase inverter booster. Let's see, a connection is missing here, so I can do this. Let's do this first. So I deleted all the traces. Let me just give you a rough idea of how this is done. So I deleted all the traces, and I'm going to export this to the printed circuit board part, and it brings in part locked. So it has this part here that's locked and cannot be moved, so I'm going to unlock it so it can be moved. So it deleted that part. So I'm going to put it back just for demonstrational purposes. So now that I put back this capacitor, so I'm going to export it again to just give you some idea about the laying out a printed circuit board, that we have to abide by certain rules when designing a printed circuit board. So now I imported back these parts, and I have to follow them and put them back in a particular order. Right, and if you notice, the further I go, this yellow wire that you're looking on increases, and the objective is to have these as close as possible. We should be about right there. Right here for this one, and for this one right here. And again, you don't want the leads to be too far from each other. So you have to lay them out where this is showing me that this is the closest point, rather than here it would be a too long of a trace. So right here is a good enough position for it, for this particular part. For this particular part, this is what it would be. Okay, when it comes to capacitors, the same rule implies. I have to create these two yellow leads coming off this part I'm moving to be the shortest, but because these are capacitors, I can't have them too near the vacuum tube, because the heat from the vacuum tube would burn out and dry out the capacitors, shortening the lifetime. So let's see the ideal spot for this capacitor. Putting it right here wouldn't do any justice to it because it's still too near to this vacuum tube. So it looks like the best position for this vacuum tube is right here, and I'm going to lock it. The next thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to wire the circuit. Right, wire up the circuit. Now, because these are high voltage rail, what I have here is a double-sided printed circuit board, and within the design constraint I have to have a certain amount of clearance from these traces, because if it's not spaced correctly, then the voltage, because it's high voltage, could jump from here over to here, and it would ruin the amplifier. So all these parts here, they are laid out in a strategic manner. All the screen grids, right, that is coming off this 550 volts rail is going through these resistors, and this is the connector for the output transformer, and this is a connector for the power supply and the heater and the bias voltage. And this here is a connector that if I wanted was to add more KT88, just I wanted was to make this 16 KT88, I don't have to build over a new phase inverter and drive stage. I could just come directly from off this. Let's look at this in 3D, and it looks something like this. These here are the KT88, the output transformer connector, the power connector, and this connector here is if I wanted was to add more output tubes, I don't have to rebuild the section. So again, there is nothing magical about any of these guitar amplifiers. It's a generic circuit. In electronics we call it general purpose amplifier. So you could use it for your microphones, your phonograph, your CD, your guitar amplifier. The only minor difference that you might have to make adjustment to is the input impedance, because a phonograph only putting out I think something around 100 millivolts if so much, or a microphone. So you might have to make some tiny adjustment for that. The second downside to guitar amplifiers, as I said, all of these frequencies are fixed frequency, versus you're going through a direct box and you're going to the console. You have a different barrage, or a whole barrage of frequencies that you can select. So again, there's nothing mystical about these guitar amplifiers. Back when we were kids, I and my friend Michael Clark from Harborview was building these type of amplifiers along with radio transmitters, and we can tell the musicians, and I hope they follow the technical advice and get out of the corporate brainwashing, having them believe that there is something magical about a guitar amplifier. And I can tell you, when something is in your head, right, it even happens to me, something is in my head and I'm swear that I'm adjusting the right EQ on the right track, and oops, this is the wrong track, and it's just in my head that the adjustment taking place. So it's the same thing with these guitar amplifier. A lot of it is in their head. In this day age and technology, you have the pedals that can give you the same functions as these guitar amplifiers, and they stop making them. They're getting outdated. The only thing guitar amplifiers good with is if you was rehearsing. If you was rehearsing at home and you're playing a subway, or sometimes you have some small clubs doesn't really have a PA, you can use a guitar amplifier. But back in the 50s and 60s, the guitar amplifiers was the PA system. So again, good day everybody. for those musicians out there, I hope I unraveled some of the mysteries behind guitar amplifier, and there's nothing special about a guitar amplifier with special tone based on what the test instrument is telling us. Good day. Bye bye.